Okay. Hi, guys. I am on page 161, and the chapter is called Direct Files. Okay, top of 161. Stop right here, and for a moment, imagine yourself forced to submit to being handcuffed and see what kinds of feelings will be aroused in you. A Chicago lawyer named John P. Alkid wrote in a 1884 book called Our Penal Machinery and Its Victims, arguing that submission to that one act of degradation prepares many young men for a career of crime. He took the reader through the experience of a youthful offender, which began with the accused, usually arrested for vagrancy or disorderly conduct, spending the night in the police station among older, more vicious criminals. He compared the criminal justice system to a great mill which somehow or other supplies its own grist, a maelstrom which draws from the outside and then keeps its victims moving in a circle until swallowed in the vortex. Alkid was part of the movement, headed by two prominent reformers, Lucy Flower and Julia Lathrop, whose work led to the establishment of the nation's first juvenile court in Cook County, Illinois in 1899. Young offenders, those reformers argued, were different from adults. They were works in progress, malleable, and could be set on the right path if the law behaved like a stern but loving parent rather than an instrument of punishment. The notion that juvenile offenders are fundamentally different from adult ones lasted for more than 80 years. Then came the crime wave of the 1980s and the early 1990s. As crack and guns flooded the cities and gangs battled over turf, the violent crime rate for juveniles ages 15 to 17 doubled, as did the violent crime rate for peoples ages 18 to 20. John J. DiLulio Jr., a political scientist who was then at Princeton, argued that we were seeing a new kind of juvenile criminal, utterly unlike the misbehaving teens of the past. He called them super predators. A super predator is a young juvenile criminal who is so impulsive, so remorseless that he can kill, rape, maim without giving it a second thought, he explained. And he warned that the numbers of these fatherless, godless, and jobless teens were growing. By the mid-2000s, he predicted their numbers would even double or triple, unleashing a tidal wave of violence across the nation. As many as half of these juvenile super predators could be young black males, DiLulio wrote in a 1996 article entitled My Black Crime Problem and Ours. In response, one state after another enacted direct file laws that allowed juvenile offenders to be transferred to adult courts if they committed certain crimes. There are no violent offenses that are juvenile, thundered Newt Gingrich, who was then the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. You rape somebody, you're an adult. You shoot somebody, you're an adult. Okay, so I'm going to pause right here and talk for a second. A lot of what this is saying is a long time ago, okay, it was decided that the law, right, the court system, people who decide whether you go to jail or not, that they would treat kids and adults differently, okay, because they believed that kids, if they made a mistake and they committed a crime, they still could be changed if given, like, another chance, okay? But then in the 1980s and the 1990s, that kind of started to change. And these people were arguing that if you did a really, really bad crime, even if you were a kid, you should be treated like you're an adult and you should receive a lot of punishment for that. Okay? And that's what we see with Richard now. He's being tried as an adult and he's going to get a bigger sentence because of that. Okay? I'm going to keep reading at the top of page 163. California's Proposition 21 was approved by 62% of the voters in March 2000. Billed as a way to get tough on gang violence and drive-by shootings, the measure increased the sentences for a number of different crimes, and it gave prosecutors the power to decide on their own if they wanted to file charges in adult court against offenders as young as 14. Previously, prosecutors wanted to charge a juvenile as an adult had to make their case in a fitness hearing before a juvenile court judge. Proposition 21 allowed them to make the call on their own in certain cases and made the call for them in others. Some cases, mostly sex crimes, now had to be prosecuted in adult court. 9 months after the passage of Proposition 21, 30% of all teen offenders in California were being charged as adults. In some counties, the percentages was much higher. In San Diego County, for example, 3 out of 4 young people were charged as adults by the end of that first year. This wasn't because more juveniles were committing crimes. Juvenile arrest rates actually began to fall in 1994, and they have continued to fall ever since. Today, the FBI's Juvenile Violent Crime Index, which measures arrests for murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, is lower than it was in 1980, and that's true across racial lines. The violent crime rate among black youth, in fact, has dropped by 60% in the past 2 decades, and the homicide rate, the rate of murders happening, has dropped by 82%. The super predator apocalypse was a myth. Yet many of the laws that Scare put on the books are still used. While California voters effectively repealed Proposition 21 in 2016, many states continue to routinely treat juveniles as adults. Each year, an estimated 250,000 U.S. juveniles are transferred into adult courts. Turn the page. Top of 164. In California, 3/4 of those juveniles are transferred by prosecutors using the discretion given to them by Proposition 21. This discretion has not been evenly applied. A 2012 analysis by California's Department of Justice found that cases against black youth were more than twice as likely to be directly filed in adult court than cases against white youths. The cases against Latino youths were more than 6 times as likely, and the disparity didn't end there. Once they landed in adult court, young, black, and brown offenders were also much more likely to serve time. Just 1/3 of white youths were sentenced to adult or juvenile state correctional facilities in 2012, while 2/3 were given probation or sentenced to serve time in county jails. For the kids of color, the ratios were reversed. 2/3 served time in state facilities, while 1/3 received probation or jail. Nationally, 58% of all incarcerated African American youths are serving their time in adult prisons. What he did was a terrible thing, Jasmine said after Richard was charged. I'm not trying to defend his actions because it was very terrible. Even so, she said, Richard was a kid who was capable of making an exceedingly dumb mistake, but one who was also capable of learning from it. Life in jail? A 16-year-old? It's ridiculous, she said. They need to give him time to grow. Why lock him up and have him institutionalized and make him worse? So, really what we need to look at here is you just need to know that because Richard was black, okay, in the United States, just based on the data and what we know that if you are black or Latino, you are more likely to face more jail time and you are more likely to end up being charged as an adult. So because Richard was black, he faced these harsher consequences for his actions just because of bias that people have. Okay? And Jasmine, his mom, is talking here at the end, and she says, like, sending him to jail for life, that would be crazy. It would be terrible for him. Okay? So we'll keep reading and see what happens to Richard.